Okay, with the main mast done, that takes us to step 20, and this really highlights why I divide up my instructions. There is 56 individual parts required for this single step on this page, and it's just too busy, especially if you were using a full etch upgrade kit for this build, which we're clearly not, but if you were, trying to work out where to put the etch in all these different pieces, because you know these three are linked, but that's a different platform. I mean, they're all linked, but there's lots of different platforms going together, and you've got to work out the etch for all of those. So that's why I divide these up into smaller sub-assemblies, because it really helps with clearing your head and focusing on a much smaller area with your upgrades and so on and so forth. So it's always a good idea to do it. I did do a video right back at the start of the channel on how to organise your instructions if you're interested. So my step 30 is this little platform here. So it's an observation platform that ultimately is going to be forming this structure here, which is the base of the bridge really, going onto that deck. So that's what we're building up next. So let's get those parts out and see how we get on. Okay, these are the parts for our step 30. So I'm just going to clean these up and then we'll have a look at assembling. First parts on are going to be the two searchlights. So the flat surface of the searchlight represents the lens and should therefore be facing outwards. Just putting that into place, and then spot of glue. Let capillary action do its thing, that's all good. The observation equipment is going in next. You can see I've done 3 there. The sprue connection point is on the location pin at the bottom of these that goes in that little hole there. So it's really important that you've cleaned that up properly to make sure it sits in the right position, sits flat and doesn't lean forward or over or anything like that. These are actually quite fiddly parts to fit because the location pin is quite shallow, as is the hole that it's going into. So if you've not cleaned it up properly, it just won't sit flat. As always, it's the last one that behaves the worst. Okay, so that is the top surface of this deck area done. We now need to flip it over and add these little supports. Okay, we've got 4 parts, 4 struts to add. Just going to have a look and see if there's any seams to clean up. Actually look. Okay. Part 33s go at the front here because they're slightly shorter, and then the part 31s go in these 2 at the back because they're slightly longer. So I'm just going to do them one at a time so I don't lose them. Right, our next step 31 is building up this section here. So let's get those parts out and cleaned up, and then we'll come and see you when it's time to fix it. Okay, so we have this central post which the command tower is built up around, and we start by just placing that into this here, and we can just put a little bit of glue in there, and that's all good. And then the mating half, you've got a little location point at the back end there. Should just clip into place, nice and easy. Yeah. I'm going to run some glue on the inside of the join there. And on the two little location points on that central mast. It's not a mast, it's just a rod that holds. It's a mounting point for everything basically. Okay, while that dries, we've got this piece that looks like some robot face, but it's not. It's the forward section of the lower superstructure. So just need to clean that bit up. Okay, and then there's two little location tabs for that. So let's just test fit that first. Yeah, the fit's a little tight, so I think we've got it there pretty much. There will be some clean-up to do on this afterwards. There we go. So that is my step 30 complete. And we want to just clean up the joints before we put that into the last part we built. So this will slide into here like that. And you can see that the little side posts that we fitted make lovely contact with the sides there. All fits great. So I'll leave that to dry, and whilst that's drying we can do my step 32, which is this little tripod leg assembly, or mast leg assembly, I'm not quite sure. I think it's holding up the next sections of deck. So that's these two pieces here. So just trim them up a little bit, then we can dry fit them. Right, so we have no location points for this, so it is done by eye only. And they will ultimately pass through these holes in this deck. Okay, so best way forward with that is to paint a bit of glue on so we've got something, we've got a tacky surface. And then we can adjust it. So if we just put it together and align it while it's tacky, putting it on the mat, make sure it's flat. That seems to be okay to me, so I'll let that dry so it's ready for clean up. So my next part of my build, so we've just done that, is step 33. So lots of observation equipment and this wind deflector, which forms part of the superstructure bulkheads as well. So let's start with D31 and D19, the base. The upper surface of this is the bit with the raised edges, so that is the lower surface. You naturally feel like it should be the other way around, I think, but no, that is the upper surface, and this fits into there like so. So let's clean that part up. The join seams are all cleaned up on this part now. And it all looks good. You have to be a little bit careful with this front face. Take a little bit of time to align it as best you can to minimise the cleanup. It'd be very easy to get that piece misaligned. Then the next thing we do is our little platform here slots in this little opening at the back, like so. And those two support legs we put in make really nice contact, so we can glue that in as our next job. So I'm just going to go in from underneath and a little bit on the bottom of each leg. That should be plenty to hold that. So the next step is this part. So I've glued that together, but I need to just clean that up. Okay, so that's our part cleaned up there, and that should then fit straight on top of this post, like so. By gluing together this, we've made a problem. I think maybe it's supposed to go into those leg holes first and then, no we can't. Right, I'm going to have to separate these two parts. So I've missed the fact that they needed to join as they go through the openings there. They're not going to sit properly. So I'm just going to put some glue on there just to heat the joints up. See if we can get these apart. There we go. We put one leg through and then it goes on the bottom there like that. And then we put the other leg through. So these are actually this is actually resting there on the bottom. Okay. Now we can glue that back together. Onto the post at the same time. Hopefully the fact that we cleaned it up before means that we can get it together nice and smooth as well. We'll have a little bit of clean up probably. I'm just putting a bit of glue where the posts are touching underneath as they go through there. Just on the underneath they make contact with the deck there, so just gluing those in just helps, I think. But look at the gap we've got at the back. That can't be right. So some filling to be done. So that's the wind deflectors on what will be the front of that deck. So which is an observation deck. So the next thing is to add all the little binoculars. So we have a number of binoculars to put on here, and there's actually two different types, part 8 and part 12. And the difference is very subtle. They're ever so slightly taller, and I'm talking a fraction of a millimetre, and that's the only real difference I can see. Right, so we need to clean all of these parts up and fit them, so I'll get the cleaning done. This is when these tiny little seam scrapers really come into their own. I would struggle to do this with a knife or a sanding stick or anything else, as these parts are tiny. So when you're fitting these, if you look at them very, very closely, the binocular has a thick end and a thin end. The thick end wants to be looking outwards. So the way I'm going around cleaning up these tiny parts, they have two connection points, is I'm leaving them on the connected to the sprue on one side and then cutting the sprue up so I have a little area I can hold, and that allows me then to get in and do whatever it is I need to do. I'm cutting it as close as I can with my sprue cutter, and then I'm just using this seam cleaning tool just to get in there. So that makes one side easy. The other side becomes more difficult because as soon as you remove it from the sprue, you've got a tiny little part that in your fingers is really, really small. So now we've removed that from the sprue, I'm holding the binocular head, which now becomes the biggest area. I'm going to take any obvious large lumps off very carefully with my sanding stick, just using the edge of it, just using one cornered edge, and then I'm going back in with my seam scraping tool I'm just going up the length of it and scraping away anything that shouldn't be there. So yeah, it's a little time consuming. And then to fit it, you want to get your tweezers underneath the binoculars on what would be the point where they'd swivel. Put a little bit of glue on the bottom there just to get it wet, and that'll start getting sticky so that when you place it, it sort of grabs and it's less likely to flick off or drop out. And then just make sure you've got it pointing in the direction you want. Okay, that's 5 done, another 6 to go. So that is the upper observation platform done. So this will form the roof of another lower platform, which is the next job. I'm going to change the order here a little bit and get this mounted onto here. So this slots down onto this bit of deck here, which will then make things easier to handle. So I just want to dry fit this anyway before we put another layer of deck on. And I'm glad I did, because my tripod legs do not want to fit in. I need a bit of coaxing. There we go. Okay, so that slots into place there. So we've got a couple of fittings to put on there before we attach that on, and then we can go in and fill and clean up the back of that. So before we get much further, I just wanted to look at the fit of this lower deck. We've The main reason being there is two ugly plastic ladders at the back end, and I just wanted to get an idea of where they are to make a decision on what I was doing with them. And the decision now, I've just dry fitted it. Whoops. That's the problem when you've got magnifying glasses on. Your peripheral vision is dumped. Right, okay, let's get her out of the way before I do any harm. Two ladders at the back end there. Don't like them, as you can imagine. So I'm just going to whip them off. Oh, being careful not to shorten the length of the platform here. Keeping everything nice and square. Okay, so that looks okay from the top down, which is where we're going to see it in the main. And I just have to remind myself I need to put some ladders in. Okay, that part is now cleaned up. And what we'll do is we'll put one of these ladders in the pot with the parts to remind me I've got a ladder to sort. Okay, so we'll have to fit those ladders separately once the deck's in place. So with this bit of deck cleaned up, we can now look at the other fittings. So first thing we've got is some more binoculars, and they're going on these little mounts at the back. So these are number 12s. So okay, let's get those on as a first job. Same process as we did on the observation, on that upper observation deck. Go, that's the binoculars in place. Right then, we have assembled our lower deck here. So we're all ready for putting this on. I've put some filler in the back, so just letting that cure and then we can tidy that up. It's going to make no difference whether it's attached to this or not in terms of being able to get in and clean that up, so we're okay to get this assembled. So we just have to tease this one tripod leg. The other goes in perfectly okay. So we'll just glue that into place. So I'm going to start by putting a bit of glue where the tripod legs are going through the deck at the bottom there. And they don't actually protrude, they just go about half the thickness of the deck in. A little bit of liquid poly just on the sides there, run that into the joint. So that assembles that bit of lower deck. And then we have a little deck that comes out of there, so let's find that. So fit goes in there, and then yeah, that's okay, and then there's a support leg that goes underneath, which we'll need to fit at the same time. I do need to deal with, I've got two very subtle ejector pin marks, and I just need to sand them out. Okay, that's them gone, so no further clear up on that, so that's that done. There we go, there's our platform there at the front, and that has a rangefinder to sit on top of it. Which looks unlike any of the others. Has a very sloped forward angle. That's that in place as well. So C5, I don't know if that's supposed to be steel, wood or linoleum deck in there. Has a waffle pattern on it now. Certainly on German ships that would be wood. But I'm going to go with steel just for ease in this case, because I can't really identify what it should be. Probably want to assemble the observation equipment on it first, just for ease of getting in. Just test fitting it. Could be no issues with that. Okay, this lower observation platform, we're just sorting this out right now, and there was actually 4 ejector pin marks that we've had to sort. Just see those there. One dab of Mr. Surface has sorted them out. They're quite shallow. We've put 4 of the binoculars in. These are the number 8s, which are the smaller ones, and the other 4 are or 6, sorry, I should say, are all number 12s, which are ever so slightly bigger. I think that's the difference. Then we've got some side shields to put on. They've also got ejector pin marks, which have, again, Mr. Surfacer has sorted them out nicely. And we've got, and we need to take those off and clean them up. So I'm just putting in the rest of these binoculars, and then we'll be able to put the side shields on and mount it onto the main structure. Okay, now we've got all the binoculars in place, we can put this bulkhead in place, which has the navigation lights moulded into the sides. I'm just going to put a bit of glue down first, just to make that surface tacky, so we can just hold it into position a little bit, and then that gives us time to adjust the parts a little bit once we've got it on. Just want to make sure that it's all lined up nicely. Here it is. So we can now run some glue on the joint, which I'm going to do from the underneath. And there's a little bit of sanding needed on that front edge, just there, where the 2 parts meet. I'm just making sure it's square, just to blend it in a little bit. Just go around and do the other one while we're at it. It's actually quite tricky, this, because you can't get in around it because of the delicate binoculars, and you can't put the binoculars in particularly easy if you put this bit in first, so just have to be careful that it's not leaning in. Right, there we go, that's in, so we'll let that dry and then we can clean that up. But that is that first stage done. We've now got to put the wind deflectors on here, so that'll be the next step. Right, now we have to put this wind deflector on the lower observation deck. Now, it's a lovely piece of moulded plastic, and I'm going to show you the instructions because I can demonstrate what they're saying a bit clearer. So it goes here on the front, and there's a little profile picture here to show its orientation. So basically it's going right up to the top of that part there, but you've got to bear in mind it has to be no taller, so don't get it misaligned because you've got this clear part going there and it'll cause some fit issues. So when we glue this in place, it needs to be just at the top. Like so. So what we're going to do is put a small amount of glue on this front face here, just on the top ridge, so that we can place it, and we've effectively tacked it in place. And then we can go in and glue the two sides then. But that is now on and looks really nice. Better than if that had been moulded in one by a long way. Now, I think one of my binoculars is a little loose as well, so just going to put some glue on there. Now while we've got the glue brush out, I'm just going to extend that ever so slightly. I don't extend it until I really have to, because it makes the bristles curl up. Okay, we are now ready to fit this. We've previously dry fitted it and we know it just sits on top there. So we're just going to hold that deck in place and put the glue underneath. And then same here. Okay, so that's the lower observation deck now in place. And that's as far as we can take that now, because this upper deck, which sits on here like so, needs the glass spacer. So we won't build that any higher for now, but there is some items we can put on top of this deck. So let's have a look at those. So the first part is this range finding unit, which sits a bit strange because, oh no, I thought it didn't clear the binoculars, but it does, only just. So we need to clean this part up. We've got quite a significant seam, and we've got a thin watertight door that is totally featureless, so we're going to remove that and replace that, I think. Oh, and there's one at the back as well. So we've got two watertight doors to put on this, and quite a bit of seam clean-up. Easier to clean the seams now we're removing the doors. If they'd been decent doors, it would have been more difficult, or we would have removed them anyway. So I'm going to put a couple of watertight doors on. The 5-star set of Imperial Japanese watertight doors comes with lots of different sizes, so we've always got something that we need. Now we needed narrower, tall ones, so there's tall and there's slightly shorter ones, so we'll just check the size. That's actually a little bit too big. So we've got some smaller ones here, and they're perfect. So Now you have got the option with these to actually model them open if you wanted to, but generally watertight doors on warships were kept closed because it sort of defeats the object for them to be open. The second section of door you only need if you're modelling the door open and need detail on both sides of the door. Okay, so that's my two watertight doors. That's two now. The doors on the photo etch set are actually handed. I'm not sure what hand these would be, so I've just taken the first two off the fret. Okay, so we need a little spot of glue. Okay, so this first door is going on this centre section here. That's the first one on, and then this other one is on this side. Sure it's straight. Who is the last one? Okay, that is our two watertight doors on, so that piece is ready now for attaching to this roof section. Now, there is a poly cap that fits inside here, so I suspect what happens is we put the roof on, so the observation or the bridge, we then plop that on, and then the poly cap that goes on top of that locks that in place and mounts this next part. So I'm going to leave that loose on there for now, and then we have three parts left for this stage here. So we've got the glass part that needs to be masked. We have this item here which sits on top, which we can clean up now. And then we've got this radio transmitter. And if you look at it very carefully, you'll see that on one side we've got some tiny gaps, and on the other side it's solid. Now I think we might have a photo etch replacement for that, which I think is these parts here. See those loops? I think they make up a replacement to that. So I'm going to have a quick check and then I'll get back to you. Yeah, we have a replacement etch part we can use for the radio direction finder, the RDF. So we can whip the top off that and just make that look a little bit more authentic. So we're going to do that while I've got the glue out from doing the doors. So they have two types on the photo etch set. They have the tripod type and they have the pole type. I have a new desk light on order. It's just going to hopefully get red of the shadow issue that we have at the moment. Okay, so that is the first ring on. You can just about see the gap. Okay, there you have it. Replacement RDF. Just for completeness. There's the plastic one. That gets mounted onto the back of that, but we need to clean that up, and I just want that to sit and think about itself for a minute. Right, last step then in this stage is to just mount the RDF, which I'm nearly going to dig backwards. Okay, so that's our RDF mounted on the back of this little turret thing here. Yeah, that's looking alright, and that will sit on the top of that, like so. So, time to put her on the ship and keep her safe until I'm ready to paint. And we need to mask that before we paint as well. So let's just put this on here so we get an understanding of how it goes together. So that just slots in place like that. So that now gives me an understanding of railings, and what I can see, which is what we were trying to get to if you remember. So I know that in the next section, step 21, we have some platforms to go in, but largely nothing else, and the platforms just sit, they span from that deck to that deck there. What I'm thinking is we can actually paint all of this now, fit it together, and we're at the point where we could put, knowing that we're not going to have any issues, possibly at the same time as we're putting the little gangways in. So I'm happy that we can paint all this and get it fixed in place for good. So that will be the next job, I think. We do have a ladder that we've omitted that we need to put in place, which we can do now that bottom deck is in place, so we need to remember to do that before we paint as well. Step 21, another very busy step, and as you can see I've broken that down. So my first step is actually 38 for me, which is this little platform here, which is this part here, and then we've got these two bits of superstructure to go underneath, and as you can see we've got watertight doors that are very nicely depicted with all the details, so I don't need to replace those. And then we have a couple of the anti-aircraft guns, which will, again, as we have done with the rest of the build, just put the bases down, and then while we paint these up, and then we can paint those and add them separately. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to move on to the searchlights. We've got a searchlight platform to build up, 2 of them actually, which sort of then go on each side, and then the shorter one goes here at the back. We've got some ventilators to build up. So all parts that we can be assembling and getting ready for paint, so that we can paint pretty much everything you see here in one hit and then just knock it together. So let's crack on with this. There's actually quite a heavy seam all the way around this part, so we need to sand all of this flat and smooth. So it'll take a little bit of time, but you can just about see it in the light there, I think. Right then, these parts are cleaned up. They fit in quite nicely. What you have to make sure is that the little structure on the side wall there marries up correctly with the underside. It's a little support strut. So we're just going to plop a little bit of glue in there. I don't know what's happening to my my brush, but it suddenly decided that it doesn't want to be a nice pointy tip anymore. I'm not sure what is causing that, but we might have to have a go at modifying the brush, I think, as in cutting some bristles off. Right, now these interlock into each other, like so. So that's that part fitted together. All looks good, nice and flat. So we've made up the parts that are required for step 21. So we have this searchlight platform, of which we've got 2. We have the forward anti-aircraft gun deck. We've got the 2 ventilators, which are only 2 parts, went together like a dream. And then we have this 3rd central search lamp platform. So I've masked off the clear parts on the front. I just need to run a little bit of tape around the back to keep the paint off, and then that is ready to go. Okay, our next step is building the 2 catapults, one on each side of the ship there. Now there is a definite way to assemble these, a sequence of assembly, which makes it easier. So I'll take you through that. Because the instructions don't make that explicit. So the best way to assemble these is to start with the 2 side pieces. When you look at the instructions, it looks like you want to be adding this bottom plate in, but actually you can put that in afterwards. So there's a couple of location points, and it's a little tricky to line them up because the parts bend around quite a bit, as you can see. So you get them lined up, hold it together, and what I do is I hold it together at this front end first. See what I mean about them being a bit tricky. And then a little bit of liquid poly on the inside of the joint there. That then sort of holds it together. and then there's two little connection points where the parts are just touching each other. So there and right at the end there. So you can see we've put glue in that line, that point and that point there. So your next thing is the little wheel that goes on the end, and this can be very tricky. So it has a little notch in it, which just rests on the bottom of the assembly there. So you can see the little notch, and what your best way forward is to put glue onto the part, hold your crane steady and just place it in and make sure you've got it nice and square. So it just butts into that, there's two little plastic bits that it sort of sits in between, and just make sure you've got it nice and straight. And I have. Okay, now you've got that in, you can put the plastic base in and get the orientation right. So this sort of lump at the end that's supposed to represent a pulley faces towards the front of the catapult. So that then sits inside, it'll just drop in nicely. If you try and put this into the side before you put the other side in, well, you'll be there for a month. It's a tricky old job. There you go, nice and easy. So that's the plastic components built up. And then the photo etch, obviously we need to put a little bit of CA on that. But I'm just going to show you. That just drops into place. The fit is perfect. So you only need a small amount of CA, and what I do is I put a little bit at the front to hold it in place, here and here, a little bit on this cross member, and up these lines here, just in that area to hold it in place, and then stitch a bit of glue there and some glue at the end, and that's all you'll need because it sits there naturally anyway.